Okay, actually, I decided I'm gonna go over this brush that I've been using recently. And I find it very interesting because I did kind of recently show a skin coloring tutorial. I actually brought up this brush, but I used it more as like a general fill tool. But now I've been using it for coloring, and it's kind of changed my approach to coloring skin a bit too. I won't even say that I have a distinct approach though. It's just more so that I just do what I want when I want, and sometimes I have like a set thing that I create, but it doesn't mean that I'm ever going to necessarily stick to that. But sometimes I may come back to it, just depending on what I want to do. So I guess first I'll show off this brush's capabilities as a line art brush. Because, you could fill in these huge shapes, but you can go back and you could kind of create these lines. And so I have this picture, I'll show it up here. Give myself some time to show. And I used this brush as line art. At a certain point, I was finishing up the picture because I think I had stopped it and I continued the next day. I'm not sure. But I just remember at a certain point I got lazy. But I want to play around with this. So let's create a squiggly line. And it's cool because you could easily get like a lot of line weight variation, but it's not like perfect. It's very interesting. I don't know how to explain it. So let's say I do a sketch. I'm not sure how I feel about that sketch, but it's whatever. Lower the opacity. And now here, I'm going to start doing the line art for this. Let's start with the hair first. So there's a few ways you can approach doing the line art with this brush. You can just go ahead and draw out the line how you want it. And I noticed, so kind of draw out the shape. And you can go back into this brush, like if I go like this, then I could go back like that too. Right? So, and you could go back and then it undoes all of that, undo all of that. Anything that you go back over, it'll either erase or refill. I guess unless you go back inside of it like this. Yeah. Because the opposite direction that you go in. I'm not even sure how to explain how this brush works because it's complicated. Yeah, so you can go ahead, draw out these shapes. You could also like block in things like this, and then I have the E to erase and toggle the erase and just go back in and erase things too. It's cool because you can get a really nice crisp outline and something that's like very kind of like a little jaggedy, and it has like its own kind of interest to it. Which, like, here's a kind of line art brush. That's how that looks. And if I was working with something softer, that's kind of how I selected the wrong brush. Working with something softer, you know, each kind of had their own look to them. This is a lot more uniform. This you could get a nice range of opacity and make certain things softer. You can also go back and erase if you want. But that brush is a bit more round. And with this brush, you can make things a bit more round too if you wanted to. I'm gonna go and kind of round off. I kind of messed that up. Yeah, so you can round off the edge by going around the tip and rounding it off yourself. You can also just keep things sharp by just going back without much regard to what the end will look like. I think for this one, it's easier to just do that line and then erase and erase again. Like it too. I think it worked really well for like if you want like a chunky eyelash look. Ooh, something else cool. Okay, because I don't really know how to explain this brush or like how I use it, especially when I'm doing line art, because I feel like you just get used to using the brush. I don't know, because a lot of like the mechanics of it, I don't even know how to explain. Okay, yeah. Like, see, it's complicated. I think if you continue going in a direction enough, that becomes the fill direction. But then if you go back again the other direction, then it becomes the undo, and there's a certain amount of, depending on how many times you go this way, will depend on how many times you have to go that way to unfill it. And I don't know if what I said just made sense, but that's besides the point, because you could kind of create like little rectangular shapes with this. It's also nice to create circles, circular shapes, although where you connect can kind of be difficult, so you're not gonna, it's hard to make like near perfect circles, but you can make pretty decent oval-y shapes. I think that's something. And ooh, one thing that I do like to do is like fingers, like you fill it in and then like that. Pretty simple finger shape. And then, yep. And then this person like black nails, I'd presume. Yeah, it's fun. That's another thing too. If you start at one point and you can do whatever you want below it, but you could create this really nice straight line as you start to come back to that point. Like here's the letter T. Here is an H. Here's the letter E. And just kind of utilizing where you think that straight edge would work best. It also works well, like here, I could erase and get that perfect straight edge. Just start at that point, go down, and then work my way back. Perfect straight edge. Get really thin lines like that. You do really close, which makes the lines kind of interesting, because you could also go see it here. I don't particularly know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doing it. Interesting line work. Okay, I'm done with that. I'm going to show off a bit of the coloring. So coloring's fun, because start to finish, I could use only this brush. Sometimes I can use a airbrush. Sometimes, but not really. So I'm going to fill this in with, I'm going to choose whatever base color I want. Let's fill this in with cyan. I'm not supposed to lock the layer yet. I guess because I have such a clean liner, realistically I could just use the wand tool. But I find, like, for more messy, not really messy, but like, because this is pretty messy. I mean, I guess more translucent, or that has like more translucent edges and kind of weird spots like that, where the wand may not choose like a super clean selection. I really like using this to fill because these are very bold. This is very bold liner. I don't really need, I could have just used the wand tool, but I said from beginning to end. So beginning, the fill. Then I lock, and then opacity. I lower the opacity anywhere from like the 30 something to 40 something range. It's usually what I work with. Let's go with 42 because I just happened to land on there. And I'm gonna do wacky fun colors. So let's add some blue shapes in the shadows. And I'm going to use some nice little shapes in here. I don't even really have to make it super exact. Let's go back in there with that. And why not use some magenta? Because why not? And here's the cool thing too, like, I have general areas where I'm like, I know I want this to be in shadow, and but I don't really have to like follow all this stuff perfectly because it's supposed to be fun and wacky, right? So I'm gonna put some purple in the deeper areas, and let's put some orange on here just because I can. And I'm gonna choose this pink color to fill in this whole thing. And that's his skin. I can also not fill in the whole thing. Like, depending on like the base color, the value, like sometimes I might leave it in specifically the shadows, or I might leave it more in the highlights. Yeah, like I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, here. I'm deciding that I'm going to do it section by section. There's the nose. It's the eyes. And it's going to go some overlap here, there to there, and some of the forehead areas. And I have a few spaces where it's left behind. And put it there. And I decided I'm going to add some yellow, because it's not really light enough in certain areas. So yeah, let's see. Add this lighter peachy color. That could definitely go over the not shadow areas. I'm going to cover some of the shadow areas, but it's more towards that end. And like that. I don't really know how to explain this stuff. White over there. Let's add some magenta in the mouth area, because that's what I feel like. And some green in between those two things, as I feel like it. Let's see, let's put some green, some of these wacky areas here, because I feel like it. Introduce the cyan color. And could do these wacky zigzags as like shine areas, like this. And overlap it again. So some orange in between these. See how that works. It's a little weird, but I think that's kind of the point. It's fun. And ooh, I'm starting to like this. Add some more orange there. And some of this pink color. Add it like that. And some more of this peach color. Let's add it on some of these highlighted areas. And I think I got a pretty interesting shape there. So let's cover up more and more of the cyan. Let's see, is there anywhere I want to reintroduce the cyan? Yeah, let's reintroduce it here. Let's reintroduce it in the shadow. And in this one too. It's that. I'm going to put some in here. Cyan. And some of the shadow area, because why not? And let's add a darker pink to the base of this. Maybe just like here. And then that lighter peach color can go here. And there's a lot of colors overlapping, so it looks pretty cool. And Yeah, let's do that. Put the same back. Let's add some purple, because why not? Oh, I like how that purple looks. I don't really know how to, because I feel explaining it doesn't really make sense. I just do what feels right. And I think sometimes that's the best that you can do. Like, I think one thing that's fun about this is that I get to play around with color a lot. It's a good way to kind of figure out like working with opacity and layering, and it creates like cool shapes. So let's put some of that yellow in here and some of it up here. Want the under eyes to be a little. I'm just using whatever colors I have like already here and not color picking, because I find limiting it just like it lets me kind of do more mentally, I guess. Like, okay, I don't like, oh, I don't have this very specific color, so how would I achieve it? Layering up new colors. And while I'm layering up these colors to achieve that color, because my shapes aren't going to be perfect, it's just going to create these cool little variations that maybe I wouldn't have had if I hadn't been forced to use that color to make the color that I needed. And you don't necessarily need to do that, but I think it's fun. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah. I think I'm gonna keep the cyan here and just, because I think the cyan looks really nice. Just gonna add some. The cool thing too is that I could do like a lot of, like, I guess this one isn't too, some like wacky colors. Purple in there. What happens if I add magenta? And then green on top of that in the back. What happens if I add orange? The orange kind of mutes everything. Let's add some orange. But it looks very bright on top of the magenta. And I want a highlight color. Yeah, I like how you can keep these really fun highlight shapes by squiggling around the brush. And I'm going to go back over top of all of the hair with the cyan. And I think that's pretty cool. Let's add some blue back in here, maybe. I don't know how I feel about that. Green. I think green will work. Yeah. And some blue on the inside. Because why not? Cyan where necessary. More cyan there. And gonna add these highlights. I'm gonna add it with yellow first. Try that, and then add light yellow and like these little shapes inside of these squiggly shapes. See it kind of a thing going on. I don't know. I kind of like this. And I'm going to add some cyan onto. I don't like how that looks. Add some blue. It's a little better. Let's add this darker blue. This darker blue again. No, undo that. And then some. Let's add it based on the areas now. Some cyan, not cyan, purple. Some orange in some of these areas. Orange works pretty well over there. Over there. Add some black back into here. And blue there. Oh, I like this. It's very random, but I kind of like it. I wasn't really feeling it at a certain point, but I think this is fun. And let's give him a little background. I'm going to put this to, here's another thing to make a pretty decent square. Is this a triangle trick? No. See, I already messed up. You go across, like that. No, that's not exactly it. See, there's a trick. It works better, I think, with smaller. Easy fix. Zoom out. Another easier thing to probably do is yeah, point over and then to the point. I think point over to the point over, and the point again with a pretty decent square, if I do say so myself. Yeah, another fun thing too is doing backgrounds with this brush. I'm gonna set it to not erase. I'm gonna set it to 36 because that's just what I happened to click on. And random shapes, right? And then bring it together a bit, and maybe some orange. Yeah, I think that's pretty good.